All right, well, I think we are good to kick off. Welcome back to Live with the League and happy 2026. I'm Emily Kalashevsky, Assistant Director of Member Experience and Learning here at the League, and I'm your host. We are glad to be back with you and looking ahead to 2026. We've got a great show lined up today. Here's what we're covering. Like I said before, first, we're spending some time looking ahead to 2026 and talking about the League's priorities. We'll have a legislative update, and we've got some special guests that we are going to get into before we sort of dive into our legislative stuff. If you're watching live, feel free to drop your questions in the chat or Q&A box. We'll answer as many as we can throughout the show. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, at the start today, we're kicking off 2026 with this first episode of Live at the League, and we wanted to take a few minutes to introduce or reintroduce someone in a new leadership role. At convention in September 2025, the league officially welcomed a new board president. As we start off, this feels like a good opportunity for members to hear a bit more about who he is and what he's excited about as he steps into the role. And to do that, I'm going to hand it over to our CEO and Executive Director, Dan Gilmartin, to have a conversation with our board president, Josh Atwood. Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Emily. If my math is correct, Josh, you are our 127th president of this organization as we enter our 127th year. So welcome, and it's great to have you on board as league president.
I thought you were going to say I'm 127 years old, but
No,
league is
no,
127 years old.
no. It may have been that long since you've had a clean shave, but you are not that long or that old. I know that. As Emily said, you became president at the convention in the fall. For those of the folks on the line that don't know you or don't know about you, tell us how you've gotten involved in your local unit of government and why this has become so important to you.
Okay. Well, we'll go with the short version here because I know we have limited time. I seen it in my family growing up. My parents are pastors, so within that you learn and observe serving. So they served people. I remember people living in our home who didn't have a home. So you get to see a lot of stuff growing up with that. So service has been in the family. And so I seen it growing up. And the other part was when people see something in you, they saw something in me and they pulled it out of me, whether that be a coach, a teacher. They seen leadership in me, when I didn't necessarily see it myself. So it's kind of like a trifecta. I seen it, people pull it out of you or pull it out of me. Coaches, teachers, league members, league staff, and you just have to step into it, and and that's what I did. When I first stepped into leadership role with the city, uh, I was getting a massage, and my therapist saw something in me, and she's like, you should, you know, put your name on the ballot and become a commissioner for the city of Lapeer. And I Googled it because I didn't know what one was at that time. So that's kind of how I stepped into it. We're small.
That is an answer. I don't think I've ever heard that answer before.
Yeah,
That is an answer.
I was very rough on
It,
my body and needed help.
yeah,
So,
and it may really speak to what you talked about too in terms of the commitment to service you've had in your family. But a lot of what you've done as a commissioner has been focused on community engagement, and even more so on the engagement of youth in Lapeer. Tell us about why that's important to you and maybe what you've learned from that as a local official dealing specifically with not just people in the community, but with the youth in a very, very deliberate way.
yeah, I noticed there was a disconnect between local government and uh, specifically young people. Um, as I mentioned, I had to Google what a commissioner was, so I wasn't sure who our commissioners were. So in my mind, leading from City Hall wasn't being real effective. That's where you take care of business. But I think where you really start making change is getting out from behind that desk, and involving the community. and there was a very large disconnect with youth in our area, and you have to go to where they are. They're typically not be coming to City Hall, so you have to go where they are at. So I hosted a couple events. And that's where we came up with the youth council. We need to revamp that, rework it, and give them something to do, get them engaged. It's our next generation of leadership. We don't want them leaving, going somewhere else, opening up a business out of state. We want to kind of retain our talent. That wasn't happening here at the local level so much, and I wanted to kind of make that change. So I did it differently in my elections. I didn't make political signs. I haven't made one yet. I'm 10 years in, so something's working.
Yeah, something's working. Well, yeah, and not only are you an elected commissioner, but I know you and your wife run a Main Street business, literally right on Main Street there in Lapeer, and not only run a business there, but you also live upstairs from your business. So you live on Main Street, your Main Street. You have your work during the day there, at least the family work during the day there. That provides a unique perspective, I would think.
It it does because you're really in the mix of it. So we've been able to see downtown grow, from what it was when we first came down here to what it is now, and it's a night and day difference. And we're kind of seeing that throughout the state of Michigan, the reinsurgence of Main Street in downtowns, because that's the heartbeat. I think that's the heartbeat of every city. When you neglect the heart, your whole body is going to be dysfunctional. So get back to the main roots of where your town began, and don't lose sight of everything else happening in your city, but kind of realign or refocus on that the downtown area, and you know you'll see
Yeah.
your city kind of turn around.
Yeah, along the lines of that, in terms of a focus and a refocusing sometimes, because we live in difficult times, there's a lot more fighting going on and there's hugging going on in the public arena, and people are just a bit turned up right now on so many different things. And one of the things that I know that the league has always prided itself on is trying to create an opportunity for local officials to come and to sort of practice their better selves, if you will, and get back to some of the knee deep policy issues and some of the reasons why people decide to run for office in the first place, rather than just sort of some of the other issues that become sort of the day-to-day nagging work at City Hall or Village Hall or where they might be. Um, from your vantage point, why is that role important, and what has been your experience in sort of getting in and being able to sort of flex your muscles and spread your wings a little bit in that environment, and how has it helped you as a commissioner?
Yeah, so the people that are coming to our events want to be there, right? They're not forced to go. You don't have to go. It's highly recommended. I've been to every single one. My mentality is if I want to be the best commissioner, best leader I can be, I'm going to go to the source of the power, or if I'm a light, I need to be plugged in, right? So MML is my outlet. That's where I get plugged in and recharged and learn. And from the vantage point, like I said, people want to be there. So I'm going to go on a limb and say these people, these individuals are the more mature ones. They want to learn, they want to connect, they want to get involved. And that's the reason why they're there, right? Too many times we see people who run on one item, they didn't like something, they didn't get their street paved, or
Yeah,
one ticket item. um, you're not going to win the people that way in your community. So it really boils down to people want to be there, they want to learn, and they want to connect. And sometimes in local government, you don't have that. You got immaturity, you got people who are name calling and all kinds of, you know,
yeah.
it's kind of stressful situation. So
You got to seek out positive connection
yeah,
nowadays because so much of it is charged. And
yep. So
yeah,
you
it's one of
come,
the things I think is great when we see, commissioners, council members, mayors, managers, whoever they might be from different areas, different parts of the state, big cities, small towns, whatever, getting together and connecting and creating their own little self-help circles, if you will, around so much of this.
Yeah, my phone book is full of people that I know will answer, the phone when I call them, and you know, give them an earful, or I'm struggling with this, and they're like, oh, and they talk you through it, and that's what it's all about, is it's coming and making those connections with the mature ones who want to make a difference and actually still believe you they can make a difference, uh, and not just force their way in, or force their opinion through, but really making those connections, and that's been huge. And we know that
Yep.
from an administration standpoint, we hear it a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, that's great. So, I agree with everything you just said right there. Looking ahead to 2026, what's a focus area? We're now in 2026, but looking ahead to the rest of it, what's a focus area or a message you want communities across the state to hear from you in your leadership position?
Okay. You saved the best for last, right? Um,
Sure.
the way I look at leadership, and I think the way we all should look at leadership is, like when I walk into a room, uh, and I'm the smartest individual in that room, there's a problem. Not because I'm like, dumber than a box of rocks or whatever, but because I want smarter people than me in that room, right? So I can't be the smartest person in the room. That's what I love about the MML and the board. We have a lot of capable people. And that needs to spread out throughout the state of Michigan, but more so it's the maturity level. And I mentioned this earlier. Um, the mature ones need to step up and lead with dignity, with honor, and even when you don't agree, right? We're getting into the habit of dehumanizing people that don't agree with us. And what I honestly feel like, and I'm worried about, is that those mature ones are going to get burnout, um, and they're going to give up, right? We can't lose those mature ones in the state of Michigan who are sitting on these councils, uh, and get. There's nothing wrong with new people. I love new people. Um, but you need both, right? You need that wisdom, you need that knowledge, you need the people who have been in it for a long time, and you need that younger generation that can be coached and actually want to learn. So that goes back to, you can't be the smartest person in the room. When I when I feel like I know everything, is the moment that I need to step down, because there's always going to be something to learn. Um, you know, and so I don't want you to give up, right? I want you to get plugged in and stay connected, and because it will wear on your mental state, when you feel dehumanized, your dignity's gone. There's no honor in these conversations that we're having. And I think we need to get back to that. We see it a lot at the federal level, sometimes at the state level. You guys would probably see that a lot more than me, but it's creeping into that local level. And we got to treat people like humans, even when we don't agree. And we need
Yeah.
to get back there. And I think that needs to be the resounding message in 2026, is don't give up, because I know personally people that are feeling burnout. They're tired of it. Um, and it's a thankless job. You say it all the time about how, you know, it's kind of a thankless job, but the reason why we do it is because people can't always come to the meetings. That's why they elect us or appoint us or hire us. They We need to do a job, and we need to show up and do our best every day. And you need to find an outlet, join a gym, talk to somebody. When you're at the MML events, make those connections, get a support group, but don't give up in 2026. And I'm just looking forward to helping us lead through whatever storms may come. I know we're going to be okay because we're in our, what, 127th year.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to be just fine. We have a great staff. We have a great board. Everybody's smarter than me, and I love that.
Well, I don't know about that because you talk about leading with dignity and honor, and it's actually a conversation we're having as internally here at the league, and we'll be re-striking up again this afternoon. And it's a difficult time because there's so much angst in the world right now.
Mhm.
And with the extension of social media in everybody's lives, and it's just been a really interesting few years to get going on. And what we've got to do is really model that behavior that we
Yep.
want to see. And as leaders in our communities, and I always say, local officials, when you're elected or appointed for that matter, there's really sort of two structures you'll work in. One is the municipal corporation of the city of, or the village of, or the township of, or the county, or whatever you are. And that is sort of a corporate structure of keeping the trains running and keeping the doors open and the lights on. And then there's the role of civic leader, and where people look to you for advice, for modeling that behavior. And sometimes they overlap. If it's a Venn diagram, it looks like this, and
Yeah.
there's some overlap there, but sometimes there's not. And I think so much of the time people are in such a look, or in such a search right now for people who model good behavior. And the more we can do that at the local level, the more we can continue to provide for people at the local level, and provide to do good things to make communities better, and neighborhoods and downtowns and everything that we work on. It's so important. And not that we can ignore everything else, but we can really impact things from the bottom up. I think that was really the reason why we started doing this in the first place, is local units and organizations like the league working with all of you to make sure great things happen. So thank you, sir. You will be around for several months here. Folks will be able to meet you and talk some more. And
Yeah.
when we meet in Lansing for the Capitol Conference, and then again at convention, and a whole bunch of different times in between. So I know as staff, we're all looking forward to working with you over the next year, and it's going to be a lot of good stuff happening. So Emily, I'll pop it back to you right now, unless there's some questions that I didn't see come up. But I'd be
Yeah.
happy to do what you follow your lead.
Well, we actually did just have a question come in through the
Oh, okay.
chat. How do you recommend navigating when it seems some know better than others on council or administration unrelated to experience? And let's start there. If you've got any advice for folks.
Um, don't try and settle those at a meeting. Um, it would require you to probably meet one-on-one and have honest and open conversations. Now, whether or not that other individual will hear you out, you have to approach it out of love, not judgment, um, and really, be honest and open to a certain extent, and ask those tough questions, and see if you can find some middle ground. Again, you're not going to agree on everything, but you have to learn how to move forward together with those disagreements or not, whether you're on the same page or not. But don't be afraid to get together with the individual and at least have an honest conversation without yelling at each other. And if it gets out of hand, just
Yeah.
pause the meeting and get back to the task at hand, which is, we have to treat each other like we're human beings and with dignity and honor. We all were elected, so let's treat each other like we were, and treat each other like human beings.
Yeah, I see that too from the outside in different communities. Modeling the behavior that you want to be the norm is so important. And when it's easy to
Hmm.
fly off the handle, or especially if you're being attacked, if there's an issue just not coming to any agreement on, there are professional ways of doing that. There are positive ways of disagreeing. That's why we have democracy in the first place.
Hmm.
And then there's sort of the stuff, the other stuff that we see that's becoming more prevalent. And I think, when I go to different communities, there are some communities that model good behavior. And even though Josh and I are on council and we completely disagree on something, it's going to be a positive conversation. I'm going to make my points. He's going to make his. We may fight tooth and nail on whether or not we're going to build a bridge, or whatever the issue is that we're looking at. But we're going to do it respectfully. And then in other
Hmm.
places, it seems like right away when someone gets questioned, it sort of goes off the rails. And so I think modeling that behavior, and dealing with some of those unwritten rules about how things go rather than the written rules. The written rules are sort of the basics of everybody gets 3 minutes and everybody gets this, that, and the other thing. But the unwritten rules is we're going to treat each other with respect or we're not. And I think those that choose the former on that do better in the long run, because there's always going to be another issue. There's always going to be another confrontation. But if we do it right, it's going to be a positive thing for the community in the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is an interesting point that this is a sort of a tale as old as time. These are issues that we hear from our elected officials come up year after year. Although maybe it feels like with all of the noise, it feels more prevalent now, or just we're able to see it more because it's things are televised or just out in the public. And I am just continually, I have a couple of folks' voices echoing in my head when these types of questions come up. Bob Slattery is one of them who would talk about conducting meetings and is a great resource to reach out to. I know that we recently did a local government 101. Um, we have that course in our online learning system, and we did a conversation between Juan Ganoum, who is with the city of Holland, and Sheila Tomkowiak, who is a mayor in Grosse Pointe, and talking about how to set up those relationships for success and how to navigate some of those things when issues or challenges do come up, so that everybody feels respected. So there are definitely resources out there, and this might be a good time for us to also just say, come to CapCon, because some of these conversations we can really get into, and you can talk to Josh directly, or find Sheila directly, or Bob Slattery, or have conversations with other elected officials who have totally been there and have found something that works and can help you figure out your secret sauce as well.
Sounds
All
good.
right. All right. Well, Dan, Josh, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to share more about your leadership and vision. It's a really inspiring message, and one that I think we all need to hear right now. With that, we are going to go ahead and shift gears and talk about what's ahead this year on the legislative front. I'm going to bring in John to walk us through key priorities and what communities should be watching as the second year of this legislative session gets underway. All right, John, thanks for being here. Happy 2026.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, let's talk briefly, overview. What's on, what are we leaving behind in 2025 and what's on the horizon as we get into 2026?
Well, in a lot of things, we're leaving almost everything in 2025. When we really think about what happened in 2025, it was a unique year legislatively.
Mhm.
And there's lots of different lenses we can put on what happened or what didn't happen. I think what we recognize, and even some of the stuff Josh was talking about, we deal with it in the legislature from a relationship standpoint, from dealing with different personalities to how we navigate the world. Under new leadership in the House, matching with old leadership in the Senate, and a second term governor who's about to be a true lame duck in her last of 4 years in her second term. There is a dynamic there that we have to deal with and learn and navigate through, which I think organizationally we did fairly successfully. But at the same time, there weren't as many things that happened in 2025. And the things that did happen were major, big things. And
Mhm.
that as being a big priority of his, that he was really focused on tackling big issues. So that included everything from transportation funding to finally coming to an agreement on a budget to dealing with earned sick time and paid leave as they started the year. So, big issues, major issues. But at the end of the day, they only signed 74 pieces of legislation into law. And just by comparison, on average, we usually sign about 350 pieces of legislation into law in any given.
Mhm.
So just from that standpoint, in terms of volume, was drastically different than what we were used to seeing.
Sure. And what would you say that says about what was happening in the legislature in 2025, that there were so few comparatively to years past?
Yeah, I think one, there was a desire by some to be more focused,
Mm-hmm.
like things as I had mentioned, and I think the other thing too, where for really years, you saw you didn't see split power as we
Mm-hmm.
sure. And that requires, and again, going back to what Josh said, right? The ability to communicate, have relationships, do that. And in the first year of that, that can prove to be challenging at times as people navigate those new relationships, navigate those new dynamics. And I think we saw a lot of that happening here in the first year. And I think we still have a lot of hope that in the second year, we're going to find ways to continue from our perspective on local issues to make progress.
So I know we're still talking about setting sort of the scene for 2026 in the landscape. If we're thinking about the amount of legislation that moved in 2025, do you anticipate so few being moved through in 2026, or would you anticipate, perhaps there being more movement?
Yeah, probably a better question for the poly market.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the reality of the situation is you're probably likely to have more. Now, do I think
Mhm.
we're going to return to a scenario where we're going to have 300 public acts signed? Probably not. But I do think there'll be some pressure, internal to those caucuses to do some of the own individual priorities of those legislators.
Sure.
Does that mean we get to 300? Probably not. Do we get over 100? I think that's reasonable to think that as we get through, again, a lame duck scenario potentially and things like that at the end of this year, that you're going to see more than the 74 that were signed this year.
Right. And I think it's important that we don't make any assumptions of folks who are joining us and sort of learning about the legislative landscape. So you mentioned lame duck, that's happening, of course, at the end of 2026. So can you explain a little bit the legislative cycle and where we're at in that as we're kicking off 2026? Because it's not like January 1, clean slate, new year, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to
Dead,
the legislature.
dead square in the middle of the legislative cycle right now. So for those that, don't get to do this on the daily, like some of us do, it's a 2-year legislative cycle. Bills can be introduced basically from day one all the way up until the very last day. And then those bills carry over on a calendar year when we're midstream between that. So all the bills that were introduced last year and not signed into law are still active, still relevant, and those will continue through this calendar year to the point where the legislature wraps up, which is lame duck, which is typically the time, after the November election and before they officially get to sine die or the last day of session. And then when we get to 2027, that would require reintroduction of any bills that died, so to speak, at the end of 2026.
So let's talk about some of the specific priorities that the league has that we have our eyes on as we're in this year. So first, let's talk about sunset extensions. If you could provide a little overview of what that is, if folks are just joining us. We might have some newly electeds out there who are just coming into the fold and where we're at in terms of legislation there.
Yeah, this is an interesting dynamic right now for a couple of reasons.
Mhm.
There are several pieces of legislation across the spectrum that include sunsets within the bills. It's usually a mechanism to incentivize the legislature to reevaluate particular programs. In this case, there are two sunset extensions we were working towards in 2025. Unfortunately, both of those sunset extensions have expired as it relates to the Commercial Rehabilitation Act and the Commercial Redevelopment Act, so PA 210 and 255 for some of you that may follow it that way. And with those now being expired, they can no longer be utilized in the shape and manner of which we have previously been doing that. We do have legislative sponsors in both the House and the Senate. It's bipartisan. The Senate has moved their legislation out of that chamber, and that's awaiting House action. And the House bills have seen action in committee, but are awaiting a vote on the House floor. And so this is where we are really putting our attention right now, is trying to get the House to take a vote of that full chamber to now extend the sunsets. Now, the fact that the deadline has passed, yes, that is problematic. But if we can quickly get to this here in January or February, it won't have any direct ramifications. We hope it doesn't have any direct ramifications on projects, but we need to act quickly to ensure that that is going to happen. And so we're paying attention, watching that very close. Jen's our lead on that. I think the one thing that would be helpful, to be honest with you, is if you as individual members have situations where you are hoping to use these here in 2026, make us aware of that so we can pass it along to legislators as a way in which to give them real world examples of why we need to move forward with these extensions.
Absolutely. Well, the other priority that we have been working on that if you follow us on social media, there's no way you have escaped any of our messaging around this, and that's the My Home program. So again, not making any assumptions about who's joining us today, because I'm sure we've got some new folks. Can you just provide a really brief overview of what the My Home program is, and where we think we're at in terms of pushing some of those legislative priorities forward?
Couple things here. One, we recognize as an organization, have talked extensively with our board about the need for more housing in our communities and
Hmm.
crisis we all face. Well, some may have different needs within that space, whether it be more rental units or more single family or more multi-unit. We're all dealing with this issue in a very direct way. And so what we did in a proactive way is to both recognize that yes, we do need to go through some zoning reform at the local level, but we also need to partner with the state in helping make that happen, recognizing that the finance gap to actually bring new units to market is one of the biggest barriers. And so what we've created is a list of 14 best practices, everything from allowing accessory dwelling units to smaller lot sizes and so forth. And if communities do half of those zoning reforms that we've recommended, it unlocks access to state resources that can be spent in their communities to help fill that finance gap. So that's really it at the heart of it. It's recognizing that we do have a problem. It's recognizing the fact that locals still need to be able to control their own destiny in this space and not be preempted when it is related to zoning, and work in partnership both with the state and our developers across this state and in our communities to really make sure we're meeting the needs that our communities have and residents have and people that want to move here have when it comes to housing.
And like I said, we're moving into 2026. Where do we think we're at in terms of that? I'm going to call it a proposal, right? It's not a formal program yet. Would require some legislative movement. And where would you say we're at with that? And what's your outlook?
Yeah, I think outlook's harder to predict than where we're at.
Sure.
But I think where we're at is we've been working to take the proposal itself and get actual language associated with that, which we're in the process of doing. And once we have that, we hope to get those bills introduced in the near future. And then from there, it's about convincing people to have a committee hearing on it, building your support for that, doing those types of things as a way to move that forward. The challenge with that, much like we started this conversation, is there's probably limited appetite to do a lot. I'm not saying that issue
Hmm.
in particular, but we have to convince people that this is one of the big issues to tackle. I think we've done that. I think the other issue becomes is how do you tackle that? So do you do it in the way in which we are suggesting or the way others are suggesting, which is through preemption of local control as it relates to zoning? And we need to be prepared for both of those conversations, and we are.
Sure. And I know we have a way for members to sign on to support this work. So talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, so I'm sure Betsy's prepared to drop the link in there, but for
It's
those
already in there.
it's already in there, right? See,
Yeah, she's way ahead of us, of course.
as usual. But one, people can use the first link she dropped in as a way to just review the proposal and make sure that it looks like it's meeting their needs, which we have a high degree of confidence that when we have talked to our members, while maybe not perfect, right? And legislation and proposals very rarely are. It does meet the moment that we're at. And if you believe it meets that moment, not only to use that second link to sign up and support it individually, but share that whether that be with other council members, others in your community or builders and developers that you work with as a way to show that there is broad-based support for this. And that really becomes critical to our success along the way.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So again, that first link for more information on the program. Second link is if you're ready to show your support there. So we are looking for folks to help us out with that. All right, let's move on because another big thing that happens this time of year when we're talking about the legislative calendar, the legislative schedule, is state of the state.
Mhm.
Now, John, again, for folks who are maybe unfamiliar or don't recognize what that looks like in terms of the legislative calendar, walk us through what that means and what we might be looking at for the governor's state of the state here in 2026.
Yeah, so it The state of the state address is annually put on by the governor. Typically, that happens in January. Well, last year it didn't. We actually are hearing that this year it won't either. It'll come, we believe, towards the end of February. The rumored date right now is February 25th. And the interesting thing about that is that will actually be post the release of her budget recommendations, which are required by the Constitution to be done in early February. So where state of the state addresses are often projecting what you may see within that budget, last year and now this year, it's going to be more of a reflection of what we've seen. And I would also anticipate, because this will be the governor's last state of the state address, it's going to be very much some of the victory lap stuff as well that she believes she's accomplished over, her first 7 years, and probably a little bit of how she wants to leave her legacy and the last couple of things that she may want to accomplish in her final year of her second term.
All right, so it's going to be just a straight budget drop and then some reflections afterwards versus a little bit of a sneak preview.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, she's going to tout the fact that she did transportation funding last year.
Yeah,
Probably the highest per pupil investment we've ever seen in K-12 education and things like that. And I think she's going to stick on the education theme as well. She's already
hmm
that literacy is going to be one of the things that she really wants to tackle here. And I think that tracks with what we've seen from others. The speaker just mentioned the other day that he would be more than happy to have that conversation and talk about that. And then the other two things that he mentioned was healthcare cost and
hmm
property tax reform. The interesting thing that he didn't mention was economic development, which was all the talk at the end of 2025. Doesn't mean that that issue is going away. I just think some of the priorities are being reshuffled here to start 2026.
Mm. And I'm sure every time the speaker mentions property tax reform, you just somehow get angels singing in your ears.
Yeah,
Um,
look, I got a call from a reporter the other day about this, right? Because
mhm,
it is almost as if the talk in Lansing around property tax reform is new. It's
sure.
we've been talking about it my entire time here at the
Yeah.
talk about our municipal finance structure and the interaction between Headley and Proposal A. Um, now can that be a very difficult conversation that we may have to have, and there may be different ideas and thoughts? But the fact that we may get to have this conversation in a very real way gives us an opportunity to talk about our priorities and to talk about why we think certain things need to happen in this space and how it collectively makes things better, both for our communities and the services that we deliver, but also the residents that benefit from that. And we can't discount the fact that they are also responsible for paying that property tax. And so we need to understand how all of these things work together.
Absolutely. So aside from those things that we mentioned, some of the specifics, are there any other legislative priorities that we particularly have our eye on in the upcoming year? Anything our members should know?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things that I will mention. One legislative, one more sort of budgetary, I'll say. We can't neglect to remember our number one priority still remains the revenue sharing trust fund. And we
Yeah,
look at the way the budget played out last year, it becomes more important than ever probably to make sure that we make another push on this. I think what we have to really recognize is as the legislature is doing less things, right, in terms of what makes it to the governor's desk. Doesn't mean they're working on less legislation, but it's just ultimately what gets across the finish line that our focus needs to tighten as well. And we're working really hard to do that, which is why you see us ready to play in the property tax space, talking about housing, continuing to talk about the financial aspect of what happens, but not forgetting about things which may seem simple, like sunset extensions. And so we still run that gamut of trying to do that. But I think the other interesting thing is, and this is the sort of the non-legislative component of it, the biggest news that maybe happened last week was the Attorney General offering opinion on the work projects that were cut by the House Appropriations Committee to the tune of about $650 million. Many of those resources within that $650 million pot were going to local communities, whether that be to help with infrastructure or buy a fire truck or whatever it may be. The AG has ruled the action by the House unconstitutional, and not so much that what they did was unconstitutional, but the way the law was written and their ability to take advantage of it as the law was written was not constitutional. And when that has happened, those departments now that are responsible for dispersing those resources can go back to dispersing them as they were. That being said, the speaker has said very directly, and I do believe just yesterday it was filed, that he's going to challenge that ruling. The AG specifically identified the fact that this would essentially be the law of the land unless challenged in court and ruled otherwise, which is what her opinions are able to do. And so while she has ruled at the request of a question proposed to her by Senator Sarah Anthony, the issue itself is not over as a result of potential litigation that is going to be happening. Now, how long this may play out or what the next step may be once this comes before a judge and whether they pause it or don't pause it, all those things we can't speculate on or really predict with any certainty. But it is an issue that we know has impacted very directly our members and those within our member communities, and one that we will continue to watch and provide updates on as it moves forward. But that was really the biggest news of last week. And we shouldn't assume that that won't play out and into things like budget negotiations, number of bills that move, what bills move, all kinds of things. And so while it may seem as a one-off, it is very directly connected to the work that we do on a daily basis.
Sure. And this is my plug. If you are one of those folks who is maybe newer to elected office, or you are trying to understand the legislative landscape and how it all works and how we work within it, we do have a really great course on lobbying on our online learning platform that we've already linked in the chat. So if you have questions about that or want to learn more, it walks you through the legislative calendar and the landscape, all sorts of things there. John, one other question that's specific that's come in through the chat. Any word on state level kratom legislation or cryptocurrency ATM legislation?
Yeah, as of right now, it's been pretty quiet. Now, I know we have some members doing a couple of other things. Actually, Sterling Heights just passed something. And no one who asked that question, actually, I just had this conversation on Friday internally. Many of you may get our Leading Edge publication that comes out every other week. We're actually going to include something in there on cryptocurrency ATMs in one of the upcoming sending of that Leading Edge. And so stay tuned for that. My guess is at some point we're going to see something very directly legislatively, but to date we have not. Doesn't mean it might not show up tomorrow when they're back in sessions. We're not always given a heads up on those things in terms of introductions, but we know that that's an issue. It's one that we're watching and tracking, making sure that we're following what our members are doing, and then ultimately may have to follow what's going to happen legislatively. But to date, there is nothing yet.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the update. As always, we'll continue to share legislative updates as things develop. That Inside 208 blog is a great place to get all of the updates as they're happening. And I want to give another thanks to Dan and John for kicking us off with a great conversation as we look at the future and into 2026. Before we wrap up, a few quick reminders for everyone. First, this is the time of year when we update the league database. So we encourage communities to review and update their roster in our system. You can head over to my.mml.org, especially clerks and managers who have administrative access, to add or update elected officials, staff, or other key contacts. Keeping this information current helps ensure we're communicating with the right people and we've got the right folks reflected in the system. So go ahead and make those updates now. In addition to that, we still have 2 upcoming opportunities for newly elected officials to join us for training. Our 2 sessions are virtual and will take place either on January 22nd or February 7th. So you've got your pick of either of those. These are a great option for anyone who's new to their role or looking for a refresher on some of the fundamentals. We cover things like introduction to local government, the Open Meetings Act, FOIA, a little bit of government finance, and more. So we hope to see you there. And then finally, we brought it up a few times. Our legislative conference takes place in Lansing on March 10th and 11th, and registration is now open. The Capitol Conference is a key opportunity to engage on policy priorities, hear directly from state leaders, and connect with colleagues from all across Michigan. You can find registration details at cc.mml.org. We are posting those links all in the chat so you have access to those easily. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Live with the League, and we hope you have a great week.